Many activists are trying to make plain the danger of climate change. Artist Carolyn Roberts has done this visually in her exhibition, Present.
It's an exhibition of 61 cyanotype on cotton fabric panels, and it represents Houston, or the weather data from where I live right here in Houston, over those 61 years. And so it is, in a way, it's like a full-scale immersive graph, but it's a little bit more than that because there's more to being inside something and feeling, for instance, the oppressiveness of the dark panels over the light panels. For each panel, the intensity of the color is representing the average overnight low temperature of that year. And so I actually had to do quite a lot of work with the chemistry of the process to figure out how I could get relatively equal intervals for the different temperature ranges. Because if anyone has ever done those little painting exercises they make us do of trying to get 7 equal tones, they'll know that's really hard. So imagine working with a mixture of chemistry and sunlight to make that happen. So that was quite tricky. And certainly making the first panel was like jumping off the high board. Like, I've just got to do this. It may not work. But it did. Once I'd made them, I needed to put the year on. And I was initially just thinking, I'll just put the year on all of them. And I was like, well, all at the same level is going to be really dull. Really dull. So then I thought, well, what about the amount of rainfall? Now I know that that's not showing any trend over time. It's always been very variable, and it continues to be roughly the same amount of variable. So yes, the width of the panel actually represents the number of flooding days we had. And that's days over 3 inches. Street flooding is pretty widespread in Houston, as we're probably all too familiar with. And so we have some years where there's a lot of flooding. Obviously 2017, 2015, those tax day floods, Memorial Day floods, that year had a lot of days, even though they weren't collected the way that Harvey was. And there are other years, we've always had years when we've had a lot of flooding, but what I notice is that since about the year 2000, we haven't had a year when there's been no flooding, whereas that used to be relatively commonplace. It just adds this interesting other level. People always comparing themselves to the panel or going, this is the year I moved to Houston, or oh, I remember that year, it was really cold that year, or it was stormy, or is that Allison year? So I really like the way that people kind of start seeing their life in Houston, and it's amazing how many people are like, well, that's the year I moved to Houston, that's the year I moved back away, and that's the year I came back. So everyone has like this, it gives them a timeline that they can stand in and kind of relate to, and then they turn around and see how dark and oppressive the later years are, and therefore how hot they're getting. And yeah, there's sometimes that moment I can see in someone's eyes when they're like, oh. It really, I'm like, really, I hate to say it, but really.
For HCC Beat, this is Randall Williams.